On 3news.com. Download the TuneIn app from the Google Play, Apple iOS store. Listen to us on the go. Coming up this afternoon, Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Ernest Addison, refutes claims ongoing construction of a new head office will cost the state some $250 million. He maintains the $121 million cost is what remains. We hear from him, plus subject to further analysis, comment on the losses posted for the year 2022. Also this afternoon, Ministry of Employment and Labour Relations in crunch meeting with leadership of striking Colleges of Education, Teachers Association of Ghana and the National Labour Commission. We're live there for details. Meanwhile, the CTAG leadership say they are unperturbed over threats to not pay them for the month of August. And much later, Senior Staff Association of the Ghana Gas Company Limited petitioned Parliament to probe the company's Genza deal following concerns Ghana is being ripped off. We'll hear from the senior staff shortly if you stay with us here for the next 30 minutes. I am Mawuena Egbeta. A pleasure that you could stay with us here on 3FM 92.7. We're streaming the bulletin on Facebook as well. The handle is 3FM 927. Same handles on Twitter as well, 3FM 927. I am Mawuena Egbeta. Again, let's get into the details. And following what has been heavy criticism over the last few weeks of the Bank of Ghana and its management over the ongoing new head office, the governor, Dr. Ernest Addison, is fighting back the claims. Not Tone MP Samuel Okudzeto Blackwell has, in a series of social media posts, revealed documents which point to upward adjustment in the cost of the new building, which is allegedly expected to amount to some $250 million. But at a news conference, the central bank governor, Dr. Ernest Addison, answered questions about the cost of the building and also in response to questions asked by Bogatanga MP, Boku Central MP Mahama Ayariga, over how the land was purchased, among other things. Here is the BOG Governor, Dr. Ernest Addison.
The government issued an executive instrument to allow the Bank of Ghana to acquire that land, and SIC was duly compensated. The bank then began to plan the building of its new head office, taking into consideration the need to ensure that the building meets all the requirements of a modern central bank of international standards, similar to central bank head office buildings in Abuja and Dakar, and includes provision for data centers, currency processing centers, vaults, and other sensitive installations. It is not just a simple, ordinary building. Let me re-emphasize that the bank followed all the necessary public procurement processes in this endeavor. No procurement laws were broken. The decision to commence construction was taken as far back as 2019, when the bank generated profits. Appropriations for the head office were made each year from profits made in 2019, 2020, and 2021. The project has therefore been going on for over 3 years. The DDEP only took place in January 2023. If we were to be taking the decision today, building a legacy head office would not have been a priority. However, this is a project that has been running for 3 years and about 50% complete.
That's the governor on the project. Well, he also had cause to respond to the criticism over the 60 billion cedis loss posted for the year 2022.
The conclusion of that technical assistance mission was that the Bank of Ghana should be able to function effectively, that is, remain policy solvent, even after the imposition of such a haircut. The IMF placed a high premium on this particular debt scenario involving that Bank of Ghana, as that was the only scenario that was going to allow the government to meet the debt threshold that would allow Ghana's IMF program to proceed for board approval. It is not money lost by the Bank of Ghana through its operations in 2022. Rather, one should look at this as a reflection of the total cost of the economic and social crisis that the country has faced over the years, and an attempt to resolve a major structural problem of the Ghanaian economy. I must also add that if one takes time to go through the historical financial statements of the Bank of Ghana, you will realize that this is not the first time that the bank has gone into negative equity. During the early years of the structural adjustment, very large exchange rate depreciations led to revaluation losses that drove the bank into negative equity.
That's the Central Bank Governor, Dr. Ernest Addison. Dr. Patrick Isumi is an economist with the University of Ghana. Let's pick his thoughts on the comments by the BOG Governor. Doc, I appreciate that you could join us this afternoon. Let's start off from the conversation on the losses and the continued explanation, not just from the BOG, has been that it's not the first time that a negative equity has been posted, but the concern of whether or not there are implications over this loss, this 60 billion loss that has been posted, has not been quite detailed. In fact, some economists here in Ghana have described the Bank of Ghana as the lender of last resort, and there could be possible ramifications. That appears to be on the quiet, the possible ramifications that we could suffer as a country as a result of these losses. Are there any, for starters?
Good afternoon and good afternoon to listeners. Thanks for having me. So, whenever you post a loss of that magnitude, I think people have the right to be concerned. And I think it's a legitimate question that are being asked for the governor to explain why we have those losses. I think the issue about the losses and the negative equity and its implication for the bank's role as a lender of last resort. The central bank doesn't have to lend out of its profit, or it doesn't have to lend necessarily out of its equity. So, in terms of its ability to perform that role, I don't think that there will be any major implications of these losses on that, because it's also the currency issuer, and what we have to understand is that if it needs to fulfill its policy mandate, it doesn't need to go and issue new currency. It can blow up its balance sheet. But just like when you go to a bank to borrow, obviously the primary means in which the money is given you is to credit your account, except that they have to have some capital to back it up. The central bank doesn't necessarily function that way. So it doesn't really need massive equity or be making massive profit in order to be lending to, the banks or the central government. So I think that's not to say that we should, close our eyes and see the central bank make losses of this magnitude. I think if you put it in the context of the specific challenges that the economy was going through and the specific actions that the central bank has taken, it can be explained. Except that if the losses were to continue for several years, then obviously it will affect the credibility of the central bank. So in that sense, I think maybe, the public is right to be concerned about that, but I think if you get a better understanding of the context in which the losses occur, I don't think we have to be too worried.
So not to be too worried, and there won't be any implications in terms of the build-up of the economy, because that continues to be one of the challenges and the grey areas where some even make the argument that it could take us up to 30 years to be able to reverse the damages that have been occasioned. Reason why the question of whether there are implications continue to come up.
Okay, so let me take my time and explain. You see, if an SOE, like an STC or another state-run company makes a loss, that loss has to be paid for because it stems directly from operation. So maybe they've gone to sign a contract for people to do something. They've gone to perform specific tax that comes with cost. So in that case, when the cost exceeds the revenue and make a loss, it is going to the books of the government. That is the central bank's operation and its loss and how it works is very different, and in particular this specific context is very different from another SOE running a loss that has to be paid for. So in essence, you call this it's a technical loss, or I would call it a paper loss.
Right.
And it comes specifically because some entity that owes the central bank had to take that money to, or take that debt in order to manage its monetary policy mandate. So therefore, when he writes it off, yes, the primary implication this is what we are already seeing is that it's giving the government more money to spend. So there's been too much liquidity in the system. So the rising inflation, even though we know supply side constraints are part, the extra lending that it has made to the government, and then the fact that it's giving more liquidity into the system, because ordinarily the government would have paid and would have mopped up the liquidity from the system. But because that extra liquidity remains in the system, all of that explains why we are seeing
the inflation, and all of that.
In essence, the impact is already being dealt with and being felt.
Right.
So we shouldn't anticipate that there's an additional
impact that could be felt. Just quickly on the ongoing building, which we've seen yesterday, sought to explain that it's not up to the $250 or $220 million. It has been suggested by the minority that it's just going to cost $121 million US, and that it's 50% complete. Based off on his own submission that if the decision to construct the building was being taken at this time, they wouldn't have gone ahead with it. Should we be seeing a halt on the ongoing project?
No, I wouldn't say that, because, if you halt and there's a possibility that the final cost will go up, because especially if there are imported inputs and the currency depreciates further. Or generally, we know prices are rising within the economy. So if you halt today, it's likely that the cost will increase the time that we decide to resume it.
Right.
The other thing is that, when you halt the project, there could be potential decay. We don't know the quality or the security specifications of whatever is being committed to. So, from my point of view, I think that the project should be completed. But if we feel that there should be reforms going forward, so that whenever the central bank want to undertake such a huge project, it requires parliamentary approval or other processes to be kicked in. That is where we should pay attention to, not necessarily to halt the current project that is ongoing.
Doc, I appreciate that you could speak to us this afternoon.
You're welcome.
That's Dr. Patrick Isumi, an economist with the University of Ghana, speaking to us this afternoon. From matters on the economy and the Bank of Ghana, we're going straight to Labour, because the Ministry of Employment and Labour Relations is in a meeting with the leadership of the striking Colleges of Education Teachers Association of Ghana and the National Labour Commission, and the meeting is seeking to compel the aggrieved members of CETA to call off their industrial action and decide on a payment schedule for the allowances in arrears. The government has meanwhile directed the Controller and Accountant General to suspend the payment of August salaries to striking members of CETAC. CETAC has been responding. We'll get to that response. But Labour Affairs correspondent Daniel Opoku, he's joined us on the telephone lines with a bit more. Danny, many thanks, and for your patience as well. Has this meeting started, and what have been able to gather?
Right, so good afternoon to you, Mawuena. The meeting has started. The meeting began around 10 a.m. this morning. And you have the Ministry of Employment and Labour Relations, led by the Sector Minister, Mr. Egbeta, who is the Deputy Minister of Employment and Labour Relations, Then you have the bloc from the National Labour Commission, i.e. led by the Chairman, and also the Executive Secretary of the National Labour Commission, Awusah. Then you have the Leadership of Organised Labour, my sponsor, Dr. Yaba, who is the spokesperson of Organised Labour. Then you also have the General Secretary of the Ghana National Association of Teachers, Mr. Thomas Suka, and also the Deputy Secretary General of TEC, all these three blocks are within the meeting, trying to discuss and also find amicable solutions to to the labor front and the issues currently characterizing the labor front. And recently, we realized that labor has not been too happy, starting from last week and 2 weeks ago, where they have expressed their frustrations, especially when cases go before the National Labor Commission. The time it delays, and also the Labor Commission giving directives that for a feuding party, for instance, government to comply with these directives are not complied with, has been a major problem for organized labor. And also, Commission has also been expressing frustration that there are instances rulings are given, and also labor and also governments also are not also complying with the directive. These are the back and forth discussions going on within the meeting. It has been a closed door meeting. The leadership of CITAC, we are told, were invited to the meeting, but unfortunately, they could not turn up. And a meeting has also been scheduled somewhere next week, the 30th of August, for them to appear before the National Labor Commission next week.
And so they are not in the meeting, and so they cannot be able to lay concerns in relation to the decision to have their August salaries frozen as well.
Rightly so, they are not currently in the meeting. And before, around 10, I was able to establish contact with the president of CITAC, who is Kevin Lane in Kumasi, and he was basically telling me that they are not too happy with the suspension of the salary. Members will obviously be affected. But for them, they said they are having continuous engagement with them. The last meeting they went at the National Labor Commission last week on Wednesday, the commission gave a directive that the Minister of Education should write a letter indicating when the payments will be done to all the principals of the 46 colleges of education across the country. Then right after that, a copy should be sent to the National Labor Commission. But unfortunately, those letters will not reach the various institutions, and is the reason CITAC has not been able to call off the strike, and that's the reason they are still on strike. So basically, there's a commission now which has to continually engage the Labor Commission, engage the directive of CITAC, and also the Minister of Employment and Labor Relations to step in and find out that there's a amicable solution to this problem beyond this week. And then that should consider someone else. There's going to be that because CITAC members, i.e., are also part of organized labor. So if organized labor should step in, trying to support or what we call solidarity strike, then clearly the industrial front is going to be affected.
Daniel, many thanks. Let's now hear from the CITAC president speak to whether or not it is they are concerned over the freeze on the August salaries.
It is obvious that if nothing changes, we won't be paid for the month of August. But as I said earlier on, we had started a process of engaging with our members to, as it were, send to them the appeal that had been made by the minister and the NLC, and we're meaning Ghanaians, and we shall continue with that process. Salary freeze or no salary freeze, at the end of the day, people think like for the love of teacher education, for the love of the calendar, for the love of the investment we are all making in there, we need to go back to work. We would do so. Yeah, I think it's important to say that we have seen the validation for the arrears from January to date, that is excluding this particular month. And it's a step towards compliance with the order. So these are all things we are using to, as it were, talk to our members to consider the appeal of the minister as well as the appeal of the National Labor Commission and make the best out of it. As it is now, when you embark on some of the consequences, you will recall that in 2018, when we were starting with the B.Ed program, we started with this same action because we felt we needed to also talk about our conditions of service then and all of that. Our salary got frozen under Honorable Napo. And eventually we got what we wanted and we talked about those things. CITAC will not do anything to, as it were, disrespect its high office or that of the ministry. It's not about we people wanting to run down the system, but it's we people asking for fairness and equity. That has been the issue.
That's the president of the Colleges of Education Teachers Association of Ghana, Prince Obeyhima, speaking there, and was switching attentions from this to the conversation in relation to the Ghana Gas senior staff who say they are rejecting the report of the Committee on Mines and Energy under reference, expressing their disappointment in the analysis of the critical issues as captured in the said report over the Genza deal. The association says that they profusely have have raised concerns about the deal and its consequent risk implications to the energy sector infrastructure, efficient management, and further called on Parliament for a probe. Or seeking to get onto the telephone lines the chair of the association, Richmond Alamu, for a conversation on this. As and when we're able to get that for you, we'll engage him pretty shortly for a conversation. But you're listening to the news here on 3FM 92.7. We're streaming live on Facebook as well. Our handles 3FM 927. Same handles on Twitter as well, 3FM 927. I mentioned that we're working the telephone line to speak to the chair of the Senior Staff Association of the Ghana Gas Company Limited, Richmond Alamu. As and when we are able to get him on the telephone lines, we'll bring his thoughts to you as well. But let's move away from this. And a continental campaign by African leaders to persuade the return of all illegally acquired African artifacts by the West has been set in motion. At the maiden event to convene the restitution for African heritage, President Akufo-Addo called for reparation for countries that were exploited during the slave trade.
Let me state that the subject of restitutions must go along with the matter of reparations. No amount of money can restore the damage caused by the transatlantic slave trade and its consequences, which have spanned many centuries. But nevertheless, it is now time to revive and intensify the discussions about reparations for Africa. Indeed, the time is long overdue. If reparations can rightfully be paid to victims of the Holocaust, so reparations can be paid to the victims of the slave trade. And even before these discussions on reparations conclude, the entire continent of Africa deserves a formal apology from the European nations involved in the slave trade for the crimes and damage it has caused to the population, psyche, image, and character of Africans the world over. The Caribbean community, CARICOM, has unequivocally announced its demand for the payment of reparations. And I would urge us to engage with our kith and kin from the diaspora and form a united front to advance the cause of reparations. I'm happy to announce that Ghana has been chosen by the African Union to host, in the latter part of this year, a global conference on reparations for Africa, which will seek to bring together Africans and members of the African diaspora and family of all hues and perspectives to set out a concrete strategy for achieving the goal of reparations. In conclusion,
that's President Akufo-Addo there, and you're listening to the news here on 3FM 92.7. We're going to switch our attentions now to politics because the national coordinator of the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers, Midday, Albert Ahin, says it is not binding on the Electoral Commission to comply with decisions taken at IPAC meetings. 7 political parties without representation in Parliament have raised concerns about the EC's decision to limit the upcoming registration of voters to the district levels, contrary to what the Inter-Party Advisory Committee IPAC agreed on. General Secretary of the CPP, Nanaya Jantwa, says they will push for IPAC to be legislated to ensure some level of compliance. Let's hear from her first, and then we can hear from Albert Ahin.
IPAC is not legislated, but it is also a mutual agreement, and it is not a servant-master relationship at IPAC. We also think that as time goes on, to make IPAC very strong, we need to legislate IPAC. There should be a law that would make whatever decisions we take there binding. So at the end of the day, the EC cannot shove and walk over.
That's Anaya Jantwa, but Albert Ahin says compelling the EC will infringe on its independence.
The people who actually mooted the idea of IPAC was like IPAC will decide, it will debate issues, but the EC has the ultimate decision. Whatever IPAC decides during their meeting, the commission is not legally bound to implement whatever decisions that the IPAC body would want to move forward. You see, and the Afro-Ghanian people at that time really were guarding against the integrity and the neutrality as well as the independence of the Electoral Commission. The main aim was to safeguard the independence of the Commission. So that, in my opinion, if it is allowed for parties to take part in decisions of the EC, then of course the independence of the Commission will suffer. I'm sure that's the more reason why up till now, that legislative thing you're talking about has not taken place. It is a very dicey issue because the EC, I know, would want to protect its independence. And that is why they are saying that, yes, there can be deliberations, there can be decisions, there can be all sorts of debate going on in the IPAC meeting, but the EC has the ultimate, they take the final decision. That is what I know about IPAC.
That's Albert Hein. He speaks, is the national coordinator of the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers, speaking to us there. And we're hoping to get a response again, but we'll have to schedule that for subsequently. But to the courts now, because the sixth accused person in the theft of monies belonging to former Sanitation Minister Cecilia Abena-Dapaah has been granted a 300,000 cedis bail with 3 sureties by the Accra Circuit Court. State prosecutors on Tuesday, that's today, August 22, prayed for a 2-week adjournment from the court in order to mop up investigations in the case alleging some $1 million and 300,000 euros theft at the residence of Cecilia Abena-Dapaah, the former Sanitation Minister. Lord Awusah was in court for us. He's joining us with a bit more details. Lord, fill us in with the details as it transpired in court.
Mawuena, we record that on the last adjournment date, a bill was given to 2 lactating mothers, Christina Chab and then Sarah AJ. Well, today the update was that they have still not been able to meet their bail conditions, and as a result, they remain in police remand. Now, state prosecution told the court that they needed additional 2 weeks to conclude the investigations, and so they prayed the court. They actually requested for 2 more weeks to be able to conclude the investigations, and the defense counsel did not oppose to this, so the presiding judge gave them that 2 weeks adjournment. There was also an oral application for bail for the other accused persons, but the presiding judge shut it down and asked them to make a formal application. Now, in that regard, the lawyer for the 6th accused person, Job Pomari, who had been charged with dishonest receiving of 300,000 cedis, was granted bail. The lawyer applied for the bail, and the judge granted it, but the bail condition was 300,000 with 2 sureties. And so we are back in 2 weeks' time, September 5, for the case to continue, the hearings continue, Mawuena.
And on that September 5, what will be expected to happen?
So, as we speak now, there's 7 accused persons. Their pleas haven't yet been taken because the investigations haven't are not done yet. So the prosecution stated that they are winding up with the investigations, and once that's done, their pleas will be taken. And so the next adjournment days, we're expecting their pleas to be taken, and because the investigations have been done, we see what happens from there, because the charges, once the charges have been read to them and the pleas are taken, then the hearing will proceed, or the trial will proceed from then.
Right then, Lord, many thanks for those details. That's Lord Awusah, my colleague, reporting for us from the court. That's how we end this afternoon's edition of the Bulletin here on 3FM 92.7. As always, a lot more news if you log on to 3news.com. Apologies, we couldn't connect with the leadership of Ghana Gas in relation to their concerns on the Gens deal. But the business team, they are up next. They'll be here shortly to bring you the very latest from the world of business. I am Eric Mawuena Egbeta. Pleasure you could be a part of this afternoon's edition of the Bulletin.
Imagine exploring and vacationing in the beautiful cities of Cape Town and Johannesburg and making business connections, collaborations, and partnerships all at the same time. Well, if you're in the agro-business and food processing sector, telco, fintech, manufacturing, financial services, events, marketing and advertising, IT and software, and looking to forge partnerships and collaborations with stakeholders in South Africa, then join 3FM 92.7 and South African Airways from the 21st to the 28th of October for the 3FM Getaway Discover South Africa. Let's travel and discover the beautiful sights and sounds of Joburg and foster business relationships amongst many incredible experiences. Tour package includes visa facilitation, return flights to Accra, round-trip flights to Cape Town and Joburg, hotel accommodation, breakfast and lunch, exclusive tours of the winelands and wine tasting in the Western Cape Province, city tours of Cape Town and Joburg, B2B breakfast sessions and business connections, exclusive access to the Grand Wine X events in Joburg, guided shopping tours and tourist sites. Book your place for the trip of a lifetime from the 21st to the 28th of October. Single occupancy, $2,699. Double occupancy, $2,399 per person. Special rate for couples. Please call 0531 100 927 to be a part of the 3FM Getaway. Deadline for registration is the 1st of September 2023. 3FM Getaway is powered by 3FM 92.7 in partnership with SAA and TV3.
3FM, your urban lifestyle radio.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Business Daily. Coming up, Pensioner Bondholders Forum call on government to remain consistent with first coupon payment of the DDEP set for today to regain investor confidence. And Ghana Chamber of Construction Industry calls on government to put strategies in place to ensure low and middle income earners benefit from affordable housing. I am Bismark. Awusah will bring you details of these stories and many others shortly. Thanks for staying. Now to our very first story. Pensioner Bondholders Forum has called on government to remain consistent with matured bonds and coupon payments as they fall due. Convener of the group, Dr. Edu Anani Entry, says government has been consistent with coupon payments for some time and urged it to continue to restore investor confidence. Government, through the Ministry of Finance, has issued instructions for the settlement of the 2.4 billion cedis first coupon payment of the DDEP due today.
Definitely there's one coming for September. And if that is even that alone, there will be some other coupons that will be maturing. We are monitoring. It's only when the month comes that we check and see which coupons are maturing. But definitely this week's one, there's another one that will come by the end of this month. We are hoping and believing that government will not go back to the defaulting times again, and that everything will be paid, so that we don't go and do this picketing, which was not what we wanted to do, but we were forced to do.
And that was the convener of the Pensioner Bondholders Forum, Dr. Edu Anani Entry. The secondary bond market has seen a resurgence with a notable rise in total traded volume. The overall market turnover has grown by 18.78%, reaching $90.40 million cedis. The following Business Desk report has more. This upswing in market activity was driven by increased transactions involving new bonds. Among these, the 7-year new bond maturing in February 2030 experienced significant activity, recording 2 major trades. Impressively, it accounted for 89% of the total turnover for the week. However, bondholders in the shorter end of the local currency yield curve experienced an average decline of 2% on a week-on-week basis. Meanwhile, the middle and end sections of the curve, referred to as the belly and tail parts, faced more substantial declines of 14% and 13% respectively. Looking ahead, analysts foresee that The sizable target size set for the Treasury bills auction could potentially continue to exert downward pressure on bond market activity throughout this week. Now, government has moved to extend the deadline for alternative offer program of what it refers to as the administrative extension of the domestic dollar bonds and pension funds to August 25, 2023. This decision comes in spite of the Finance Ministry's earlier announcement indicating a remarkable 91% participation rate in the bonds, which commenced on July 14 this year and was initially set to conclude on August 4. In an official statement released on Tuesday, August 21, 2023, the Finance Ministry clarified that the administrative extension serves as an opportunity for holders who haven't yet tendered their bonds. This extension period is intended to allow these holders more time to secure necessary internal approvals to participate in the exchange through this specific administrative window. The Finance Ministry had previously outlined its intentions to restructure bonds valued at $809 million in its documentation covering the exchange program. As the new deadline approaches, market observers will closely monitor the situation to gauge the impact of this extension on investor participation and the overall trajectory of the government's alternative offer program. To some other story, the Ghana Chamber of Construction Industry says government's efforts to addressing the country's housing deficit will not yield expected results until low and middle income earners can afford such interventions. CEO of the chamber, Emmanuel Cherry, is of the view that government must focus on putting systems in place to enable developers build at a low cost.
Government business here must be tailored towards providing housing products for the lower class and the middle class.
SDG to go.
Government business here must be tailored towards providing housing products for the lower class and the middle class citizens. Government has no business to provide housing for the upper class and the middle upper class. If that happens, which means government is coming to compete with the estate developers, the private sector. Those people are already out there. They can they can afford anything. So therefore, what business do you have to do there? The people supposed to be the downtrodden. That is the lower class citizens who cannot afford. Even 10,000 may not be affordable to them, even though they are talking affordable housing. So as for Ghana Chamber of Construction Industry, we see affordable housing as something that possibly is out of play. We define it as housing by income, not affordable housing. So based upon your income, government must be able to give you a tailored product so that you can afford. Okay? But immediately you talk affordable, $50,000, $100,000, how can it be affordable to you? As a government worker, how much is your salary? Taking all together, what comes out of what is left? Nothing.
This is still Business Daily with me, Bismark, Awusah. To some other story, Country Manager of Agra, Juliet Lampo, is calling on the stakeholders within the agricultural space to focus more on local production of food consumed by Ghanaians to increase access to healthy diet. Rising food inflation in the country has made it difficult for most Ghanaian female families to meet the daily nutritional needs. She believes the problem is due to the importation of basic foods consumed in the country.
SDG to go beyond just production. It's also about nutrition. And as we mentioned, the access to healthy diets is a challenge because it's becoming more and more expensive for the average person to afford a healthy diet. Unless we as Africans, the government, civil society, development partners, unless we get back and redefine our goals and take steps to increase adoption of technologies so that we can increase production, focus a lot more on domestic production of the foods that we eat, focus more on the inputs that we have to use domestically so that we'll be able to increase production, not just of food, but healthy food sustainably so that we can feed our people.
And that was Country Manager of Agra, Juliet Lampo. Now, before we go, the Bank of Ghana Governor Dr. Ernest Addison has been defending the construction of new head office building, giving out more details of the project at a news conference here in Accra. According to the governor, who however did not give the cost of the project, the central bank is fully aware of its responsibilities and working to ensure it does not exceed the budget set for it.
the government issued an executive instrument to allow the Bank of Ghana acquire that land, and SIC was duly compensated. The bank then began to plan the building of its new head office, taking into consideration the need to ensure that the building meets all the requirements of a modern central bank of international standards, similar to central bank head office buildings in Abuja and Dakar, and includes provision for data centers, currency processing centers, vaults, and other sensitive installations. It is not just a simple, ordinary building. Let me re-emphasize that the bank followed all the necessary public procurement processes in this endeavor. No procurement laws were broken. The decision to commence construction was taken as far back as 2019, when the bank generated profits. Appropriations for the head office were made each year from profits made in 2019, 2020, and 2021. The project has therefore been going on for over 3 years. The DDEP only took place in January 2023. If we were to be taking the decision today, building a legacy head office would not have been a priority. However, this is a project that has been running for 3 years and about 50% complete.
And that was the governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Addison, ending Business Daily with me, Bismark Awusah. For more business stories, please log on to 3news.com.